Clay.
Okay, well, let's get started. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Okay, call the roll.
Commissioner Newton,
Yes.
don't have a burn, right? Commissioner Bennett,
Yes.
Commissioner Kerr,
Yes.
Commissioner Nupp,
Yes.
Chair Johnson.
Yes. Are there any amendments to the minutes from our last meeting?
I wanted to talk a little bit about the minutes. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes?
Jeff, what's your take on how closely these minutes should represent the actual conversation we have in our meeting?
I think it should be representative of the discussions and then pretty much dead on your motions and actions. But, you know, I've worked with a broad range of them where some barely jot down what's going on in the actual, because, you know, we do have audio and video of everything, so we don't really transcribe.
Okay, well, I guess that's there was a technical issue in the last meeting. Well, I thought there might have been a technical issue in the last meeting where we had a motion, it was seconded, and I just wanted to make sure that we were moving properly forward, having had a motion and a second. Bill said, you know, we can have a conversation, you don't have to vote on it, but that's not reflected in the notes, that whole back and forth. If it's on the audio and video, then I think that's fine.
Yeah, and also, Clay, you know, I always, and we'll talk about this, we're going to have a discussion item at the end about procedural matters where we'll go over some of this. But I do recommend that, you know, if you do have issues, especially with motions or any of the actual action items, or, you know, you're speaking to a criteria or standard and you want that really verbatim, make a note of that. And, you know, we should really get that to what you want that to be. So, and like I said, and I'll show this in the discussion item at the end of the meeting tonight, you know, all of this is available nowadays in audio, video, and nowadays with that live feed that we're doing on YouTube, it automatically does a transcription. So we will have that as backup too, so.
Okay. All right, well, in reading the section just before and after the motions made, there was a potential, I think, for a little uncertainty about which motion we actually voted on. I think ultimately it's clear, based on what went to City Council, based on your staff report to City Council, but it's not entirely clear in the notes here, which may not be a big deal. Maybe I'm reading more into it than I need to, but it is something I noticed that we're not even close to verbatim on the notes, but maybe that's fine.
Yeah, if we're going to be discussing this later, why I have some comments to make on that. I'm particularly interested in knowing how or what the council members get in the information from our meetings. And I know some of them do listen in on this, but I'm curious about that. Okay, so are there any other corrections to be made on the minutes? Okay, if not, do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I approve. I make a motion.
I second.
Call the roll.
Commissioner Bennett, Commissioner Bennett,
Yes.
Commissioner Kerr,
Yes.
Commissioner Nutt,
Yes.
Commissioner Newton,
Yes.
Chair Johnson.
Yes. This is a legislative matter regarding the public hearing and consideration of 20-01 Cannon Beach Municipal Code amendments to Title 17 zoning, unit size and accessory language amendments. 20-01, the city is considering adopting changes to the definition regarding accessory structures and habitable space while clarifying language regarding breakfast, short-term rentals, off-street parking, and exceptions to building height regulations. Language limiting the unit size of all single-family mobile housing and manufactured housing in Cannon Beach to 2,000 square feet is also being considered, while providing for larger accessory dwelling units as conditional use in residential districts. If any commissioner has conflict or interest, such as a direct financial benefit or deterrent, the commissioner should consider stepping down for public hearing. Does anyone object to the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission to hear this matter at this time? Does any commissioner member believe he or she has a conflict of interest or personal bias? Okay, staff report.
All right, I'm going to share my screen here and just so people can see what I'm referring to. All right. And hopefully this will work. Yep, okay, now I got it. So hopefully those out there can see my screen. So the staff report, accessory language, I've posted this online. First, I want to thank all the citizens who submitted letters and emails and or asking to speak tonight. I appreciate the comments and the input, and we forward those on to the Planning Commission. We will also put them in post them on the website and place them in packets. But mainly this, the zoning ordinance changes, I think they can be broken down into a few different categories. One of the things that I spoke about in the kind of the preamble there is that this has been kind of accumulating over a year or year and a half of about different minor changes that it began with, and mainly around accessory dwelling language, the bed and breakfast language, and some of the language which I'll call habitable space and those kind of terms or definitional changes. And then we've had a consideration of unit size along with that. And so they asked, the Planning Commission has asked to put the unit size on, and we have discussed different tools that can be used for unit size. And in the past, the city has used floor area ratio and lot coverage as some of those calculations that they use. And when I did an initial analysis of building permits over the last few years, I didn't really see too much. But so the Planning Commission asked me to review it a bit further, and I pulled data from Clatsop County's records. And that's what the figures here that I'm going to refer to over these unit size. So the data here, figures 1 through 5, represent the different square footages of different units in Cannon Beach. And this is only Cannon Beach, but provided by the Clatsop County's Assessor's Office. And you can see a slight trend over the years for the past 100 years. And yet most of our homes under figure 2 there, you can see most of the homes built in Cannon Beach are under 2,000 square feet. However, if you look at it further slice it into time periods and the number of units built square footage over those years, you can see in figure 3 that starting there really in the 1970s, if you look at that bottom 2, the blue category and the red category, those are your square footages under 2,000 square feet.
Excuse me, Jeff, I'm not seeing anything on my screen at all.
Oh, you're not seeing anything? Is anyone else seeing anything on their screens? Barb?
I can see it.
I can see it.
I can see.
I can't see anything. It just has new to working from home. Here are some tips to help you meet like a pro.
Huh.
It's in the packet as well.
Yeah, it's also in your packet. This is
Yeah,
just.
I know. I have it in the packet, but
Okay. So, so that tells the number of units that are being built per year and 10-year periods. And then the figure 4 shows that same percentage. One of the things I'd like you to look at is that bottom 2 categories, the red and the blue, which are the 2,000 square foot. And at least from 1970 on, that percentage has declined. But as is pointed out in some of our comments, that is a national trend as well. And I'm happy at any time if we want to look further into data or further across the nation or the state, I'm always happy to look and supplement this information. But I was just given a brief analysis here showing what square footages, the sizes, the number of units, and the breakdown of how many in the city of Cannon Beach are under that square footage. And then in that final figure 6, I looked at the Zillow market home values over the past 10 years compared to our other Clatsop County areas. And you can see we're outpacing a little bit there and forecasted to outpace the other jurisdictions. But, you know, so I want to get back, that's a unit size kind of breakdown, at least from the data perspective. Like I said, there's plenty of tools out there to look at and control unit size. Some that I've already mentioned are floor area. You can up just the floor area ratio so that you only allow, less square footage per lot size. So that's a ratio of the lot size to the actual floor area. You can also do it by a geography. In other words, some mentioned, I believe we had some say, you know, if you're concerned with the presidentials or certain areas, the historic cottages or some of those structures along the oceanfront or wherever, well, you can do it with a zoning overlay. And that's often done in some areas, especially in historic communities where they want to preserve the historic area. They will put an overlay over just that district. It can be done by zoning district. So you could say just over the R1, R2, and R3 areas. So there are various tools, various different ways you can do these kind of limitations and to look at the unit size as part of a different strategies. And you can also combine tools. I think I've brought up in many times that in Aspen, Ketchum, other communities, even and in the East, they'll use transfer development rights in combination with unit size or historic structures. And so there's different tools that could be employed. We are currently in the language that's before you is 2,000 square feet, and that's built on gross square footage. And that is, as defined, pretty much just everything that's enclosed under a horizontal plane within the walls of the structure. So that includes garages. So we require 2 9 by 18, so that approximately 20 by 20 or 400 square feet for 2 cars. It doesn't mean you have to have a garage, but if you have a garage, that would count. And so that is one of those considerations I think that got mentioned quite frequently during this. I also mentioned in the staff report about non-conforming lots in non-conforming structures. One of the things that we would keep in mind that if this language went through as is at 2,000 square feet, anything that currently is over 2,000 square feet would be, if we did not put in some kind of grandfathering clause, that everything would automatically go into a non-conforming structure that's over that 2,000 square foot. And we can look at that language further if you want to see what that entails. But basically it says, if you currently have a home over 2,000 square foot and you wanted to add on, you couldn't do that. You could alter your structure and repair it or add, a height or whatever, as long as it's within the building height level, but you could not add on the square footage. So that's one of those other limitations that would be brought on by this ordinance. I quote some of I took some excerpts from the Cannon Beach Comprehensive Plans that have come up through many of this discussion. I talk about the village character, diverse population. The city will encourage the development of housing which meets the needs of a variety of age and income groups, as well as groups with special needs. Number 6 says the city recognizes the importance of existing residential neighborhoods and defining the character, and will strive to accommodate new residential development in a manner that is sensitive to the scale, character, and density of the existing residential development pattern. And then 10, the city will encourage the preservation of older housing stock. And so there is language in the code regarding size and scale, and I just wanted to point those out. Definitional changes within this ordinance. Within the ordinance changes is before you. I talk about there's some minor changes and to different language, but short-term rental and parking changes are, we have talked about off-street parking is a continual concern within the city of Cannon Beach. What this does is provide language that, and we can look at this language, I'll bring it up here in a minute, but it's to make all parking that's someone has to supply 2 parking spaces, or if they're doing short-term rentals and have to supply more, then that has to be shown on the site plan and provided as improved parking area, and not just simply as we do nowadays. You can show it on your site plan, but it can still be grass or whatever. We would say that this would be gravel or some type of improved surface, and that would need to be indicated upon the site plan and provided on the lot. That way, it would come out of that lot coverage calculations. And then the short-term rental language, we have language in there about fire suppression, so that anything over 10, not 10, but over 10 would be required to have fire suppression as part of the permit process. And then we also have language in there that kind of correct or realign that calculation of parking to occupancy. And the bed and breakfast changes was instead of the condition, the language as it reads now, the condition runs with the land. This would say that it would run with the owner, so that any change in ownership would require a new conditional use permit. So I'm going to touch on really quickly those changes as it looks in the ordinance. So you can see accessory dwelling, we put contains living, kitchen, and restrooms area as part of that. Anything that's red is an addition. It would be underlined. Strike through means we're getting rid of that. That's a repetitive language of with or without. Habitable space. This is language that got some comments from the public, and this language is what we pretty much go by from our building code, and that's really what we live by, because it's our building official that habitable space is defined by in our code. And so this has been analyzed by our building official, and that's really what we pulled from our various locations in our code and how we interpret habitable space. Then the kitchen, just a fine a refinement of that. The accessory structure, I just reconfigured that. It is pretty much the exact same thing. I reconfigured it to make it read a little bit easier. It's still not the easiest thing in the world to read. Accessory dwelling, as you can see, we put the habitable space reference in there so that it becomes a little bit more clear. And then we will also, as part of that, have given the ability for limited conditional uses for larger accessory dwelling units as part of these ordinance changes. And then these are those short-term rental changes that I mentioned about the occupancies over 10, and then off-street parking, where you find that. And then these are those larger accessory dwelling unit conditions that they would have to fall by. And that means only an additional 600 square feet would be allowed. And then in these areas here, and then there's the unit size. And like I said, all single family dwellings, modular housing and manufactured homes located in RV, RL, R1, R2, RAM, R3, RM, and C1 shall be limited to 2,000 square feet of gross floor area. And then the exceptions to the building height regulations, I inserted something to clarify that serving utilitarian or institutional purposes and only accessible by exterior means. So does anyone have any questions?
I have a comment.
Yes.
Okay, this is because all I have is this cartoon on my screen, so I can't tell who's there. I just wanted to say that, you know, when I see it written out like this, it looks very draconian to me. And I don't think that anybody was married to 2,000 square feet per se. I think the intent was to limit the building of McMansions in residential neighborhoods. And there's all kinds of things that could, somebody in a letter said, well, what if you have a 1 acre lot and you can only build a 2,000 square foot house on a 1 acre lot? Well, things can be tied to zoning too, can't they, Jeff? I mean, it just can't limitations on sizes of houses be tied to zoning in certain residential areas, you know, R1, R2, whatever. And that the 2,000 square feet was not etched in stone. It was just a suggestion thrown out there to begin with. And it's possible that people will think that's too small, or, you know, it needs to be larger. But the idea was to limit McMansions from being built in residential neighborhoods and essentially ruining the whole look of the neighborhood and the character of it.
Yes, I think Commissioner Kerr, thank you for bringing that up. I agree. I don't think it was a set in stone. No one really suggested that. It was to get the conversation started, and I think it has. And yes, just as I mentioned earlier, you can do that through overlays or simply through the zoning districts. Right. You can say only R1 through R2, R3, that this square footage would apply, or a gradient of those, you know, 2,000 in these zones, 3,000 in other zones. So there's many ways to do this. And, you know, I appreciate you, the Planning Commission, for at least getting this conversation started. And I want to just highlight as well that in my recommendations is that I recommend that we have this conversation discussion, or at least from the plan, you guys have received some of the materials here, but I think we should keep this open at least one more month so that we get some more comment on this, more feedback, and you guys can deliberate. You can, and with, as I'll be talking after this with the discussion item, we're going to be going into a code audit. There's no reason why, you know, you guys could not table the actual unit size for that discussion, for the larger discussion. But that's not to say you might want to set the standard at a certain limit now. So I do feel that there's a community, support to at least look at this and address it, because we did get at least a dozen comments. I know there's more, I hear more. And so I've recommended, to continue this at least till next month. I would say you could continue a written until the 21st, because the meeting's on the 28th, and then you still have oral for the actual meeting.
Okay, and Jeff, I noticed also that on letters, at least maybe I missed this, but I couldn't find it. They didn't have the information of what the person's affiliation with the city was. Like, so I couldn't tell from reading the letters for some of them, if a person even if they lived here full time, if they had a vacation house, or if they were a real estate agent, or if they were a home. Some of them I could see were contractors, but so it was really hard. And I know there was a letter from an architect, but not all of them stated what the affiliation was. So that made it very confusing, because, that does influence a person's point of view. And there is another issue that I couldn't bring it up in the email, I didn't think, because I don't think that was appropriate for me to email this to the other planning commissioners. But I also wanted added to this discussion a height limit for oceanfront homes. And the reason I bring this up is because Clatsop County, the Arch Cape overlay, for example, has a height limit for all oceanfront homes. They have a standard height limit for regular homes, and then they have a much lower height limit for oceanfront homes. And there's a good reason for that, is because if you have a high house on the oceanfront, you're blocking a lot of views of other people's homes from their homes of the ocean. And it's just, there's these right now behemoths sitting on the oceanfront, and it just, it's like a dark wall. You feel like you're in a city when you walk down the street. So I think that that's something I'd like to see. I have the language I pulled from the code for the Clatsop County and for the Arch Cape overlay in particular, just because their oceanfront, they have maximum building height of 26 feet, except for oceanfront lots, which will have a maximum height of 18 feet. So that basically one story, they can have high ceilings, etc. But I mean, I just think that that's a good idea to have that on the table as well. I think that for our code to be much more lax than Clatsop County doesn't make any sense to me.
And so Lisa, I responded, I think, yes, you have the ability as a body, as a planning commission, to amend zoning ordinance amendments to place that on this if you feel that it's not a significant change to the current package. You're able to go ahead and add new language to that, because it still has to go before the city council. There's plenty of time for review. And so I would just, if you would like to forward that to me, Lisa, I would be happy to place that in my next staff report, along with some comment on that.
Okay, yeah, I'll just forward you the Clatsop County language for the Arch Cape overlay and see what people think. Yeah.
Jeff?
Okay.
Yeah.
Jeff?
Yes.
Concerning the 2,000 square foot number that was thrown out, if I'm looking at your figure 4 and figure 3, if we use that 2,000 square foot percentage, every house, or half of the houses built since 1990 would be in violation. That seems very radical.
I would agree. Yeah, and I can get you, kind of exact numbers on those kind of things. But yes, I did a kind of just a rough estimate that in the past 30 years, pretty much 75% of the homes are over that 2,000 mark.
Yeah. So is it possible to, I don't know if tonight's the night to do it, but to discuss a figure that sort of addresses the problem more directly and makes a little more sense?
Well, I think what you could do is, you know, if you would like, first thing I would ask is that, is there any more kind of information or data you would like? You know, I noted, here's the areas that I noted from the public comment. And then, you know, what I would recommend is we have the public comment period, and then let them, you know, speak, and then I'll jot down any more notes that we might have, and we would kind of review those. But what I would recommend is that we come back, and then when you guys go into deliberation is when you guys decide, you know, what's really the best way you guys want to deal with that unit size, okay? Because right now you're kind of collecting the information. And that's why I said, you know, you may reach the point in this public meeting or public hearing, and at the next public hearing, you may reach the point during your deliberations that, you know, you might not resolve this at this phase, and you may want to table that for that discussion with the joint sessions with the Design Review Board and the City Council, because we're going to be having those coming up. So, you know, you have the ability to kind of take this as information you're gathering from the community, and then a good opportunity for deliberation on that subject. And so you can set the kind of terms there for your recommendation to the City Council. If you feel, you know, that you're persuaded to go one direction, then go ahead and offer that as a recommendation to the City Council at the time. And you have all the room you want to discuss that during deliberation.
Okay, and is there any more information available about other jurisdictions who've imposed, you know, gross square footage limits on housing?
Yeah, I would love to look into that for you. You know, that's no one's really asked for any kind of market analysis or anything like that. You know, it was brought up in the public comment, but yeah, I'd be happy to research that. I know there's some Oregon housing nonprofit organizations that's I believe their main goal, and that's what they look at. So I'll reach out to them and see if they know any studies on this.
Great. Yeah, because I couldn't find anything except the Seattle one. I read as much information as I could on that, but again, it was very limited. I would like a lot more information. It'd be great.
Right, yeah. You know, and I you know, each one of those they're different markets you're looking at, and different segments. And, you know, I know that short-term rentals, it's similar, different, the metro areas versus the coastal areas and the resort areas. It's a different kind of dynamics, but at least getting the latest information on that and adding that to the record and letting you guys see that, I think that's key. Anybody else, Clay?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
How did the public know about this meeting and the contents? How did you post what was going on here in this?
Yes.
And how
So
does it get posted? I guess that's my question.
So we publish it in the newspaper. We send it out in all the utility bills. And then any vacant property owners, we send out to vacant property owners. I would suggest we'll do the exact same thing when we go to the City Council. It's not easy getting people's attention nowadays, you know, because without the local press, I really feel it's a difficult challenge. And, you know, if anything's probably been the most difficult, I think one of the things we're so polarized as communities is because we have no local press, and the news is very difficult to get out in any kind of, you know, way. And so we posted on our website. We've had it posted for 2 months, and we are trying to get it out. If you know better ways, I suggest emailing me, calling me. I am happy to come, and if I could juggle and do a circus act, and I do whatever I can to get the word out. Because seriously, my job is not, I think people think that I write the staff report and I'm making the recommendation. So I'm speaking for the, no, I'm trying to get people to come out and speak for citizens. And that's my goal. That's the only thing I'm here for. So whatever I can do, if you guys have better ideas, that's what we're here to do. So
can you send me what you posted in the, you said you did post in the paper, in the Gazette?
yeah. And we in fact contacted our local newspaper rep is actually a gal that lives in Kansas City. And so we contact her, we send her our news releases. So that's how we have to get the word out a lot nowadays. So
I think we have a suggestion that we should be on Facebook.
Yeah, we have a local Facebook. Thank you, Judy. And so whatever we can, please email us if you have other ideas. But yeah, keep sending them, and we'll send them to Judy. She can post them on Facebook.
And Jeff, what's been City Council's input in particular on the housing limit, the gross square footage limit? Have they had any input to you? Have you brought this up to them, and what's been their input if you have?
No. I think that's what they look to you guys for, at least for the first, it's Planning Commission to gather and make a recommendation. And that's why they have you guys. And so, we'll see. I really think, of the dozen or so we've gotten so far, they have been, they've spoken their mind on that 2,000 square foot as a, limit. But, I do want to keep reaching out and seeing them if we can get others involved.
Charles brought up a concern I think we all have, and that is, making sure we don't have a bunch of people in the city with non-conforming uses. Can you talk to the group a little bit about how the grant, I think I read you to say we need a grandfathering clause to make something like that, whatever that number is. If there is a number, we need a grandfathering clause. Can you talk a little bit about how that would work to the group?
Yeah, I'm not big on grandfathering clauses, being a planning and zoning person. I do think that there needs to be sensitivity to those that are already constructed or in homes that are larger than 2,000 square feet or whatever number or tool that you end up using. But the reason I say that I'm not fond of them is because and we'll look at more analysis that it will gather on this kind of topic. But anything that I've seen so far is that really, and a couple of citizens even spoke to that, even if you were to grandfather or you're going to set limits and things like that, whatever you do, either through the time or the number, the square footage number, whatever you're doing there, you're kind of handcuffing that to one set dimension or set time. Now, if you were to put the grandfather clause and you said it only would start with this ordinance, right? Well, what that says is that those folks that have 4,000 square foot homes in some ways have kind of struck the jackpot, because then they can build up to whatever they can. I'm not saying whatever that floor area ratio still applies. And so there are still limitations, but they're going to even be more maximized. That square footage is even going to be, have a higher market value, if you will. And those others, then the new things at 2,000, it's a different kind of dynamic working there.
Jeff, I don't understand that though. Who cares about if they have, so they did if someone hit the jackpot, they hit the jackpot. Why should that influence our future, plans for the city? I mean, we can't do anything about that. If someone built a 5,000 square foot home right smack in the middle of a residential neighborhood, blocking 3 houses' views of the ocean, they did hit the jackpot because there was no limitation to stop them at the time because they bought a double lot.
Yeah,
But I'm saying is that why is that a consideration of ours, whether or not that happens in every single piece of legislation that ever happens, is that somebody skated underneath the wire and there's not much you can do about it, but you can influence the future. And so I think what we should concentrate is on the future, because that's all we can do anything about is the present and the future. We can't do much about what people have done in the past and that they've gotten away with something, even though it might rile somebody and it doesn't seem fair. It's not
Yeah.
really something that I think we should even consider.
yeah. To speak back to what you're saying also, but also what Clay was speaking to, what that really, the grandfather clause would do is alleviates any of those homes over 2,000 square foot currently that are built over 2,000 square foot right now would, with the passage of this ordinance, would become non-conforming structures, which means that, hey, if you're going to upgrade your home, and that means alter it at all, then you're going to have to do that to 50% of its improvement value current. So if you go to the assessor's website and you look at your improvement value on your home, which doesn't include the land, just your improvements, then you are limited to 50% of that over a 3-year period. So it's not, it's not like you said, I'm not polarized on this either. But I just want you to, that's what you're doing when you approve this without any kind of grandfather. Whereas if your grandfather, that person that has the 4,000, if their floor area ratio still allows them to go to 5,000, they could still add on to 5,000 square foot without any kind.
No, I think that's ridiculous, but and I'm also, here's my biggest concern is people are turned off to this, not because they necessarily don't like the idea of having limitations on size or limiting McMansions, but the figure 2,000 freaks everybody out. And to me, that didn't seem like such a bad figure to begin with, but now I'm seeing that it's turning people off to the whole concept because they can't get past the 2,000 square foot limit, and they're not realizing that that number needs to be worked through. And I'm wondering if there's a way to present it so we don't have a 2,000, so it's not like, because it disturbs me to see people turned off to the idea of size limits because they don't like the 2,000 number. Because maybe it'll be 3,000, maybe that should be the limit. I mean, what I like personally doesn't really matter. It's what is a reasonable, size limit, and maybe it is bigger than 2,000. Maybe it's 2,500. Maybe it's 3,000. But I think that the way it's presented almost seems as if we're locked into this 2,000 foot thing, and that's what's scaring people.
Yeah, that's
by that. Let me jump in, Jeff. By that, if the average lot is 5,000 feet and we've got our FAR at what, 6.6, then isn't that a 3,000 foot house? Don't we have that in place?
Yeah, so that's exactly. So that FAR is acting as our limiting force. And I think the question that comes up is that, that's dependent on how big a lot you got, right? So that's the issue currently. Now there's jurisdictions that, let's just say we have lots that stretch out into the mountains or into the ocean or the beach area, so that square footage is part of that FAR. And so, some jurisdictions limit that kind of allowing those kind of sensitive areas or terrain not to be calculated within that. There's lots of tools available that you can look at. I'm happy to do some further analysis of some of the different tools, and I can put that in the next staff report. And then you guys, when you deliberate, can discuss those and decide, hey, what do you think may be the best route for us to handle this number?
Jeff, can I just jump back on that though? Because I think that the best thing here is to keep it as simple as possible. I told you earlier, I like the idea of the overlay zones to protect historic character, houses with historic character that were already in place. But you know, in talking that through, maybe it's too complicated, but just taking the example you gave, if you take one of those larger lots, an acre, chances are it's not exclusively, but chances are the majority of those larger lots are not sandwiched into the core city where you have the smaller lots. They're going to be on the edges of town where a larger house's scale would be more appropriate. I think in a number of the letters, I heard people saying, you know, let's talk about appropriateness. And I think there's also this is government overreaching. I'm not going to make any opinion on that, but there is that argument. I understand. So I do think we need to look at things pretty globally. We don't have a lot of large lots in the city. Most of them are smaller. We have an FAR in place that is going to limit the size of houses. If we want to protect the historic, I'm looking for the language here, historic character and village character, I can't remember the wording, then that to me would be some sort of protection of some of the existing houses that we consider, as you've said, historic. I just don't know how to do it without making this too complicated.
But Clay, I invite you to go down on Pacific Avenue on the same, the junction of Pacific Avenue and the street that the bakery is on, the Sea Level Bakery.
Alta.
Yeah, look at the house there. They ripped down a cabin. It's a double lot. It's oceanfront, and it's a 5,000 square foot house. And it is blocking the view of 3 houses back behind it. And it is a behemoth. How do you prevent that? Why does anybody need a 5,000 square foot house?
Okay, I just want us to kind of put the brakes on though, because we're getting into deliberation, and I really think that this is a question phase, and so we really shouldn't be kind of discussing it between us. So if you've got questions of me and more things I want to look into for the next, because you'll get to deliberate, you'll get to talk about these things, and we want to hear from the public, and that's what this hearing I think is really about. So. You know, any other, we'll have another chance after we hear the public for you guys to say, hey, this keeps being brought up. Let's have more on this as well, Jeff. Okay.
Could I add one thing that I would like addressed is how we handle double lots.
Okay.
And that's not being addressed.
Okay, thanks, Barb.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
Charles, you got anything? I don't think so.
Okay. Okay, persons who wish to speak, please state your full name and mailing address. And if you appear as a representative capacity, identify who you represent.
And so who did we have, Katie, as our two? We had
Speakers, we have Lois Moore and Jan.
Okay, so Lois, I'm gonna unmute you here. Can you hear me, Lois?
Yes, I sure can. Thanks.
Yeah, and can I say that you have the best backdrop I've seen tonight? That is beautiful.
That's because I didn't want you to see the rest of my living room where I've been undergoing a sewing project. So there's a method to my madness.
Okay, state your full name and mailing address.
My name is Lois Moore, Post Office Box 988, Cannon Beach.
Okay, you want to present what's on your mind?
Sure. I've already sent a letter to Jeff, which I assume he has distributed, expressing opposition to the change of language in the bed and breakfast zoning ordinance. So I'm not going to beat that to death. You all have that information. I am a current bed and breakfast owner as of a couple of years ago. But basically, I have 3 questions. So, you know, sometimes it really helps frame our attitude about these things if we have all the possible information. So the first question I have is with respect to conditional use permits in general. Are they typically issued to the land, to the dwelling, to the property? Or are they typically issued to the owner? What's the standard procedure when you issue a conditional use permit? Are bed and breakfasts currently an exception to what is standard practice here in Cannon Beach? Can someone help me out?
You want me to answer these as we go, or would you like?
Let's answer them as
Okay.
yeah.
So
Whatever you want.
Yeah, so Lois, I can say in most places I know of and I've worked, conditional use permits would be usually with the owner, okay? Or sometimes they're almost like they're a permitted type thing, and so they're renewed. But it ranges. I mean, and in Cannon Beach, I believe they run with the land more than they do with the owner. So that traditionally has been a run with the land type of activity. So, and like I said, you find them in all different shapes and sizes. So I can't say that there's one way to do it, but I have seen more run with the owner across the nation that I've worked, and yet Cannon Beach traditionally has done it the other way.
Okay, so bed and breakfasts are currently done pretty much the same as any other conditional use permit.
Yes.
Okay. My second question then is, because there are only 4 operating bed and breakfasts in Cannon Beach, and there've only been 9 in the last 50 years. I'm just wondering, what is the problem that you're trying to fix by changing this ordinance? What's broken? If it's been the same for the last 50 years and there've only been 9 requests and there are only 4 operating now, it seems like the way it's been has pretty much, you know, proved itself to be workable. So I'm just wondering what is the problem and what is driving the need to change it now?
And I won't, I don't speak I just write what I've been directed to from the Planning Commission. This came up as over the last year and a half. And so they've asked to switch that. And so I guess they can speak to that in their findings or in their deliberation and their decision, Lois.
Is anyone willing to share with me now what's driving it? I mean, I'm just really curious to know. I've talked to some other bed and breakfast operators. They've all been issued their permits like 20 years or longer. And I just am wondering what's the problem that's trying to be fixed now? So if somebody is willing to, contact me outside of the meeting or whatever, I'd be glad to hear them out. I'm just trying to get more information so that I'm fully informed. So
I think part of the question to us on this issue was that most of the landowners, it's like you're passing on this gift if you buy this house that has a bed and breakfast, where if it's, and also the discussion on parking spaces in residential areas came up in that decision also. So I think that was part of the motivation for not allowing that business to proceed with the landowner. And that's, of course, they can come back. If it doesn't go with the new purchase, they can always come back and issue a permit to have a bed and breakfast there. So it's not like it's excluding them, but it was a sort of a gimme if you're selling a piece of property, if it's a bed and breakfast, as a caveat. Whether or not they want to maintain that or not is up in the air. But I think that was part of the thinking behind that.
And I would further that, Chair Johnson, that I think at the time when that decision was discussed was that they also, it's the only one within our short-term rental type of licensing area is that has unregulated. In other words, it's not 14 days. It's unlimited, other than those 5-year lottery and lifetime unlimited. So it was the only one that worked in that area as well. Whereas, currently now we're only providing 14-day permitting. So that was the only other item that I remember discussion on.
Yeah.
I'd like to respond to, I think it was Mr. Johnson that talked about it being a gift. That gift has value. And when we purchase the property, the value of that gift is paid for. So it's something that enhances the asset that we're buying, and we pay for that. So now if you're taking it away, as I believe I said in my letter, if you take it away, you're devaluing our property. And I don't know why. Again, I'm asking why we're doing it. I don't know why you would want to do that. I'll move on to my third question so you can, get to a lot of other people here. If there really is a good reason to do it, and, I'm wanting to understand that, then I know, Jeff, you said you're not big on grandfathering, but because there are so few in existence now, why wouldn't you grandfather in the existing ones? What is the opposition to doing that to avoid devaluing the property if and when we do sell it down the road?
Yeah, from my perspective, Lois, it's like you said, it's simply the administrative component. But I don't think I've worked in a jurisdiction that doesn't have some type of grandfathering in some situations. And like you said, this is a very limited number. But you know for your own case that we had trouble finding the record at the time that you did it. I mean, that's what.
Oh, I've got it under lock and key now.
Yeah. But that, so that's why I say that it's difficult to track a lot of that. And at least historically it was. I think it will be a lot easier now in electronic data that we have, but that's just from an administrative perspective. But like you said, it's a very limited number in this case.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much for your time.
Sure, thank you.
Okay. Are there other persons that would like to speak?
Judy, looks like, wait, we have Jan first. And let me get her on here. Jan? Okay, I think.
Hi, do I need to give my address and everything?
Yeah, your full name and address.
Okay, Jan Siebert Ormond, P.O. Box 778, Cannon Beach. I just wanted to ask for sure that you do continue the hearing for next month. That's all I really wanted to ask.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So was there anybody else that contacted?
No one. Okay, so we asked for noon because of the new Zoom. We asked that people let us know by noon.
Yep.
But it's definitely up to your discretion to take anybody that wants to raise their hand and speak. And Judy is raising her hand right now.
Okay.
So, Will, let me, are you okay with that? Okay.
Hi, I'm Judy McLaughlin. My address is 4910 Northeast 134th Street in Vancouver, Washington. My mother-in-law is Jeannie McLaughlin, and she lives across the street from Pig and Pancake. My concerns with this is I have been a long time visitor of Cannon Beach and hope to eventually move to Cannon Beach when we retire. I've always loved Cannon Beach. The concern I have with the limitations is my mother-in-law's house, especially, right across from her is a beast of a house on the corner there that's being built right now. I completely 100% understand having some limitations in town on size of house. I completely understand having limitations of height of houses, especially those on the ocean. I mean, she has lost what little tiny view she had because of the big house next to her. But this big monstrosity that's on the corner that's being built right now is horrific. However, it obviously was approved by the city. So the fact that somebody let that go through is mind-boggling. But my concern, and my big concern, is houses that are or properties, which most of them are very far from town, that are an acre plus, or even 3/4 of an acre plus. Putting a 2,000 square foot house on an acre piece of property is kind of like putting an ant in the middle of a field. It just doesn't work. You have to be able to make a house when you're buying I used to live on 1.5 acres. When you buy a house that's a property that size, you need a house big enough for your family to work from home, to school from home. If you have a child with special needs, you may need extra housing space for nurses, that sort of thing. And multi-generational families are getting really popular. I mean, the reality of it is, God forbid something happened to one of my in-laws, they're moving in with me. I'm going to need space for that. And I think that though I think it's very important to keep the town looking like the town with the cute little houses and the cabins and that sort of thing. I think when you're talking about property that is of substantial size, which again is not in the little city limits of town, putting limits on that on top of the limits that are already in place is overreaching and isn't very fair. And it's not opening families to be able to move to Cannon Beach. I mean, if you've got a school, you've got all these different things available for families, and you want it to continue to be a family community. My husband was brought up in Cannon Beach from the time he was like 6. And I would love for my grandkids to come to Cannon Beach, but I have to be able to have a property that will fit everybody. And I just think that anything over, 3/4 of an acre needs to have a broader option. And I just want to say, whoever approved that monstrosity on the corner of Washington Street, shame on you. So I'm all done now. Thank you and Merry Christmas.
Well, so the current zoning language is what approved that across the street. So that's why this is important, right? I think that's why you're looking at this kind of language right now, because that is what our current zoning language allows, okay? And the same also with...
needs to be the difference between in town and bigger lots. I'm all done.
So I just wanted to say, we also have Caleb Whitmore that raised his hand.
Okay.
Okay.
Hey, everyone. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Caleb Whitmore, P.O. Box 1175 in Cannon Beach. So I sent in a letter and I put my further comments in there. I just wanted to say, at the meeting. I appreciate the discussion you guys are having. And I think I know the house that we're all riffing on here. I would agree, it doesn't look great. It looks out of character. It looks too big and boxy, and it's terrible. So if we can figure out as a community ways to keep things in character, like we already have written about goals for the city, that's great to do. And I think we should pursue that. I do get very concerned about an absolute restrictive number. I think that's probably not a good way to go. Or even overlays or zones, potentially. I think there are certain cases where something might still fit. The biggest thing I would say, I hope you can get more articulate around in considering any potential language, is allowing existing footprints to be expanded. That was the issue, one of the key issues we experienced in Seattle. I lived in the Ballard neighborhood in Seattle over a period of rapid growth, and these awful huge box townhouses started going in next to little houses, and you'd have lots subdivided with a big box house in the backyard. And it wasn't a great change for the neighborhood. And I think that's somewhat similar to what people are concerned about here in Cannon Beach with this now, with these certain houses. But what ended up happening with a restriction in floor area ratio, not just lot coverage, is scenarios where homes that people lived in, they couldn't even build out their attic or their basement. They couldn't improve their habitable space. And therefore, they had to sell their house and they had to leave the city. They couldn't be a multi-generational family or grow their family or add someone to their household. We talk about supporting people with disabilities or special needs. That's already written in what the city wants as goals. And if you need a caretaker, as was just mentioned as a scenario, you might not be able to do that. So if restrictions that are already present, and I think probably for the most part sufficient, except for exceptions that we maybe all would want to avoid in the future, if you do restrict it more, I think restricting people's ability to make use of an existing structure and the interior space in it is a really bad idea, because that just creates all kinds of heartburn for existing homeowners. And I don't think that's what we want as a community. So I appreciate the thought that's been expressed about grandfathering, and I know that there are some challenges there. But minor changes, not additions, but remodels interior that might reconfigure or make more livable, usable space, I think really need to be able to be allowed. Or even if somebody wants to bump out their house and add an extra bathroom out there, over their backyard or whatnot, I think minor things like that need to be able to be easily afforded in a way that doesn't create a lot of controversy or a lot of heartache and heartburn for people who love where they live. And that's why we're all here.
All right, thank you, Caleb. And we have one iPhone. Let me ask who it is here.
Is there somebody that would like to speak?
Yeah. Can you hear me? This is Jeff Moon.
All right, Jeff, just give your address and.
My address is 220 Ogden Drive, Oregon City, but I own property in Cannon Beach on the east side of 101, just north of Surfcrest. And so my thing is, this is way restricting the 2,000 square feet. I bought a piece of land that's over an acre. It's right next to my brother Steve Moon. And I want to bring in my parents, my mom, because my dad passed away 3 months ago and stuff. And so we want to build a house for her on that piece of property, and a house for my brother John. And also move our business eventually from downtown to let that grow as a nice addition, and get our station from downtown and make it more better for the city of Cannon Beach in the downtown district, improve that downtown district. So restricting houses, we're looking at slope restrictions and all that kind of stuff now, but we want to make this happen and stuff. And with slope restrictions, we're going to have a daylight basements under these houses for foundation walls, for and all that kind of good stuff. And so we'll have a house on top, and then we'll have our garages down below. And I believe most cities and in the United States do not count garages as part of the living spaces. And so you're really restricted to a 1,500 square foot house if you put a 2-car garage in there. So that makes it tough. So if I want to put a 1,450 square foot house in there for my mom, I'm going to have a daylight basement. That just jumps it to 2,900 square feet. And if my brother John wants a 2,040 square foot house, it's going to make it a 4,000 square foot house. Well, when my dad built a house in 1970 in Cannon Beach, at that time that lot was a 1/4 acre. It ended up being a 4,300 square foot house without the garages. So it's 4,700 square foot house. You count the garages in these calculations. So it'd be really interesting to know exactly if these stats you're getting from Clatsop County is actually including garages for every house that's stated on there. And I would doubt that. So, but anyways, it's just a big concern outside. You're on the east side of 101, and why? And you have nothing with the oceanfront or nothing with the historic areas of Northtown, downtown, the city center, and Southtown to Tolovana Park. In these things, and you're putting a crimp on all parts of the town, stating a 2,000 square foot house or whatever it might be, even if it's a 3,000 square foot house. But when you're in the hills and stuff, you can't have a 1-story 3,000 square foot house. It's going to cost you way too much for all the needs that you need to take into account. So I wish you guys would look at it and just keep an eye on, you're putting a restriction on the whole city as under one idea. And I just think you got to look at that closely and take more time on this whole thing. And I've talked to a lot of people in town, and they did not see any major descriptions of what's happening with the changes to all these different things in a mailer with the utility bills and stuff. So I don't know if that got out to all of them or not, but it was pretty generic, and these are some pretty major changes, I think. That's all I got to say right now. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Okay, are there any other presentations for or against what we are discussing? Okay, are there any further discussions with the Planning Commission members?
Yes, I'd like to just say, listening to people, I understand everything everybody said, and I don't know if people are not listening or what. We don't have a 2,000 square, we're not proposing a 2,000 square foot size limit. That's just a number that was thrown out there. So we're not trying to restrict anyone to 1,500 square feet living space with a family and caregivers. That was just a generic number. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to basically stop what was described as that terrible house across from the, on downtown across from the church. That's the kind of thing we're trying to limit. Big, huge houses in the city itself. I don't, as far as being outside the limits, I don't think we haven't even discussed that. And, outside the actual city proper, no one is trying to, the county does not have any rules about that were referred to as, what I was talking about when I was talking about county rules was just oceanfront house limits, height limits, that's all. So I think that when people hear that there's going to be some new restrictions or new ideas coming into the city ordinances, they get panicky and they just see the part that really turns them off, and they don't look and they don't, listen to the whole thing. It's just in the planning stages. No one's trying to put in a 2,000 square foot house limit for the out in the hills. No one has even talked about that. That it's just an idea that is slowly forming of how to live big houses in city. That's all. And there's different ways of doing it.
And so I would just like to say that, I've been involved in many huge zoning rewrites and ordinance amendments and changes of down zoning, taking properties that were 1 unit per 100 or 20 acres to only 1 per 160. So, I've been through quite a bit of controversial things, transfer development outright programs. And Lisa, I think your point is well taken in that, and Jeff Moon spoke about it, as no one saw the notice or discussed the notice. Well, the notice went out in all the utility flyers and we've gotten it out in the paper. But quite frankly, even when we go through all of these, I rarely get the public involved, or people just rarely come out until the city council phase. A lot of times they wait to see how it plays out with the planning commission. And Jeff knows I've asked everyone as much as they can to get that word out there. And I think that's what we've got to continue to do. I put my email, our department email up there. If you have suggestions, if you want to refer people to this our website has it posted. They can comment to us, call me, but I highly recommend we keep it open at least another month. I'll get information to you, and we can talk about if we want a work session on certain items or whatever we want to do. But I'm happy to look into a lot of this. I've taken notes on some of the things you've wanted to research or look at language on the double lots and the language from Clatsop County. I'll look at other areas that have put restrictions on square footages. So there's plenty of information that's out there, and I'll try to do my best to pull that together. I can also look into some of our data that we have for Cannon Beach. Jeff mentioned about the Clatsop County number. Yes, you're right. That Clatsop County number does not include uninhabitable spaces. So garages are not included in that number. Okay, right. So that's just habitable space number.
Yeah, but Jeff, is it possible if you put out further notice about this, that you don't use the 2,000 square foot, you say 2,000 or some other number? I mean, because all people see is 2,000 square feet. That's all they see. And they don't even read the rest of the thing or digest the whole thing. They just see that number and freak out.
Yeah, and what we'll do is, so the number the 2,000 square foot number that freaks everyone out is, like you said, that's because the state requires us to put out exactly. And, Jeff said he doesn't know what that is. Well, the state defines exactly what we have to put in the notice. And so we can put in that, but like you said, when we speak about this or when we put out press releases, we can definitely shape the narrative to that we're just looking for tools and what people want to, where do they want to see these limits, and what type of limits they want to see.
Right, 2,000 square feet or another number. That's right. That's all it has to say, because then people start thinking, well, what is reasonable? Maybe is 3,000 reasonable?
Yes, and like Clay said, and others have said, it's possibly not an issue with just a strict number across the city. This could be by zoning district or by overlay district. So there's other ways of looking at this. So I will show those in maps forms as well. And then I can also show properties that are still vacant and show you kind of where the potential growth areas are. And so that you'll have some of that analysis as well. And I can also show you, where our aging infrastructure is. So where are the homes that are, say, 1960 and older? Okay, so that those that are prone to these tear downs and things like that. So I can kind of look at that and explore that, and I'll do my best. We do have other zoning issues going on, but I'll do my best to pull together as much as I can for you. And we can always look at that next month.
Yeah, so this topic will be continued to the next month.
January 28th is the next meeting.
Okay, January 28th, we will take this topic up again. So,
all right, thank you.
yeah. Okay, moving on down here on the informational items, is there anybody who'd like to speak about the tree report?
I'd like to at least say that of all, I haven't been here that long, you guys know, but only 2 years. But I feel like I spend 50% of my time on trees with the damage that we've had with these windstorms. And, you know, that one that was the easterly windstorm that we had, that really did a lot of damage to some of our trees. And we have been playing catch up, city arborist, myself, Katie, on these trees. It's kept us busy. It's a huge task just to, you know, the tree removal permits and the approvals of the public and the private, and all of the new construction that we're seeing right now, and the tree removal permits that are part of that.
Okay, ongoing planning items.
Okay, I'd like to speak a little bit to procedural matters. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Lisa, can you?
Yeah, I just see procedures. Yes.
Okay, you can see it, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, and so I first wanted to show you guys next year's Planning Commission meeting schedule. And that's going to be, like I said, January 28th starts off the year. You'll see down there at the end, we have November 25th and December 23rd. So likely, maybe at next month's meeting, when we talk about the new chairs and officers, that we also talk about that as November and December, or any other dates that might be issues for anyone, and shuffle those around for next year. And then this can also be found on our Planning Commission page on our website. If anyone is ever needing information on when they need an application deadline due and when to get the information into us, that's right there with that table. So I wanted to speak on a few things here about procedural matters and what we're going to be trying to do over the next 2 years. I think a lot of you guys know that we're getting ready to launch next month our very first transportation system plan through the Transportation and Growth Management Grant Program. That will be starting next month. And with that, I had approached you guys and Design Review Board and the City Council a couple of years ago, about a year and a half ago, and we started a discussion about a visioning project with a comprehensive plan update, a strategic plan, and then some ordinance revisions. We had one joint meeting and we decided to scale that back a little, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But what recently came up was over some findings, our last group of findings was some procedural matters, and that you guys have, it seems to, from what I have learned, is that at one time you guys reviewed all of your findings, or at least the controversial ones. And so you guys would, what we would do is we would approve them as a kind of a preliminary approval. And then you guys would say, at our next meeting, we would like those findings back. And so I would go back, the staff person would, they'd type up the findings, send those out, you guys would review them. And then at the next hearing, that's when you approve the findings. And I've worked in pretty much the full range with the different places I've worked. I've had some that I do all the findings, or the staff person does all the findings, wherever that is, and they just automatically go on to the city council, or they're the finalized. I've worked in other jurisdictions that does this, where they ask for every finding to come back to them. I've also worked in ones where the chairperson is given the authority to review the findings and he signs off on them, or she signs off on them. And then there's other versions. I've had one planning commission chair who was an ex-lawyer. He actually drafted them. I would review them, and if I was fine with them, I'd send them out. So it can be done in many different ways. I recommend that we're seeing so many, I would say, controversial, or at least they're getting more controversial. And I suggest we do all findings come back to the planning commission body. They can review them over the month and then make their decision on those findings. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But so, because what we're talking about is going from codes, and then from that, building from that code, you have an application, and then it goes to hearing, and from that, at that hearing, you're judging by that code, that criteria. That's what you're judging the document on, or the application on. And then you make the findings from your deliberation, okay? Deliberation, decision, you come back with findings, approve that. You see that arrow after that? Well, that arrow after that is because all those things that you go through, and this is looking at all of the planning commission for the last 15, 20 years, you can see those are the different types of applications. You'll see that we're down to, only a couple a month that we do. You can see the percentage, but if you look at that, you can see that both the appeals and the administrative appeals are slightly increasing over that time period. And so what your powers and duties are as the design review board and the planning commission, since the design review board falls under you, at least from a zoning perspective, is that you're to develop and maintain the comprehensive plan, investigate and make recommendations regarding the implementation of the comp plan, and then develop, prepare and review land development regulations. So you're to kind of look at what's going on, what's coming back to you, filter that out, and make improvements to that language. And that's what we're doing. That's what we're in the middle of with these zoning ordinance changes. And that's what that amendment process is about. So periodically, as local goals and needs change and new information is obtained, zoning ordinance as codified should be updated. And so we need to keep updating this. That's part of what this kind of living document that we're working with, still respecting the vision of that comprehensive plan and the direction of that comprehensive plan, but make those kind of changes. This is the design review board language. So the design review board met last week, and we're discussing this as well. So when I said that the city council decided not to go for the vision and the comprehensive plan and update and all that, they still want to do a code audit. And so that code audit, what it will do is look at where that comprehensive plan direction leads us as almost this 30,000 foot level, and say down at that ground level, how does those zoning, how's it performing? And so when everyone talks about the new house or the new homes and how it's maximizing the square footage, well, maybe there's something that's not playing out now on the ground like it used to. And it's getting more and more that way. And so we need to find ways to And it might involve not just the zoning code, but also the design review board. You know, so I'm hearing a little bit of both, and that's why we wanted to do this next code audit as a joint process between the planning commission, the design review board, and the city council. And so the applicability right now is for all new construction or new development except for single family. Okay, so right now the DRB does not look at single family. But it's been brought up quite frequently in the last 6 months at least, that maybe that should be one area of growth, or at least we address that as well. I want to begin this though with those findings, okay? And the difficulty or some of the kind of controversy over the last findings. This is where it begins. This is where the findings begin, at the application phase. And the applications are built from the language within the ordinance, okay? So much of our language in our ordinance do not even ask for certain things within the applications, okay? So this is an application for the DRB. And you'll see it's got the typical name and address and the site location. And then it's got a blank for project description. And then it tells you the list of submittals and their site analysis diagram, site photo, site development, landscape plan, architectural drawing, architectural model, energy conservation methods, property survey, all these things, right? And then I don't want to pick on anyone, and I'm not trying to pick on anyone, but I just pulled up an application that we recently saw. And so this is what we've traditionally gotten back. And so, you know, it's not often filled out. This is the other one that we've got for the Planning Commission. And you can see how that one's filled out. And often it's one sentence answers to applications, right? But you'll see with the application, what I want you to note, the setback application, what is it, the main driver in the setback reduction request? That is the criteria from our design, from our setback reduction application. So what we got as part of our application is the drawings, the different architectural renderings, the site plan, and yet we did not show, and those drawings there with the red lines and the pink or red triangle, that's what I did to show what the normal setback would give you as far as square footage. It did not show the trees. See that number 1, 2, and 3? And these are all issues that came up in your all's discussion on it. And that's the reason I put this out there, is this is the Hofseth that came before you that was appealed and went to the city council. And a lot of the discussion went way off paths, down different avenues. We talked about trees quite a bit, and yet they were only removing one tree, asking to remove one tree from that site. And yet that wasn't even shown in the applications or any of the forms. And so it did not come up until the actual appeal stage. And so that's why I think, you know, so I take a lot of the blame as well. I have to ask for complete applications at the application. But if those applications are so vague that they don't really ask for what we want to see as part of the review process, and the ordinances aren't written to what we're really talking about in our concerns, then your findings are not going to align either, because that's all I can do with findings is use this right here, which are the setback standards. This is what you're based on, and this is what you're building your case on, okay? Because that's how you have to look at it, because as you know, many of these are now going to appeals, which are then often going to either the Land Use Board of Appeals or maybe some other court. And so this is what we're going to be built on, is this case right here, making our cases along the standards and not veering off onto a subjective and aesthetic type of things if it's not listed directly in here. So I ran over this with the design review board because here's their submittal requirements. And they really, they have unbelievable kind of detail. And so they've got a site plan, development plan that, like I said, a landscape development plan, architectural drawings, or an architectural model, energy conservation, property survey, and then the criteria goes into, I don't know if you guys know, but the design review criteria goes into this kind of scoring system that is a 1 to 3 point scale for each one of these different criteria. And I have yet to see for my 2 years here, our design review board ever use this criteria. And so we're way out of line with what we're really trying to do. And so, so I bring it back to this, that the code has to align with the application, because the application needs to ask the applicant, hey, what materials are important to making this decision? Because that comes back to our criteria. Then you go to the hearing and you guys need to follow those criteria, make decisions on those criteria, and then review those after I draft them up and put in them in findings. And the reason I say that is because here you are now, back, we're looping back and we're starting to make those changes, right? But will our application change? Will they tell us anything about what we're wanting to see at the hearing for that applicant to bring forward and argue over these points? And then you make your findings so that we can present that, so it doesn't have an opportunity to get appealed, or, you know, won't get as appealed as often. So on our website now, one of the reasons I say this is because on our website now, like I said, every single meeting, you can get our audio and our video of every single meeting. And this will be for eternity, as long as YouTube or we're out there. And so whatever we say can be, you know, is recorded and will be used in arguments going forward. And so Commissioner Kerr had asked about that one phrase in this conclusion about the Planning Commission discussed weighing the need for workforce housing and where those instances occur, such as Sea Lark Apartments in downtown. The commission weighed these needs with the reality of providing new residential. So if you want the opportunity, you can go to the audio recording at 35 minutes and 30 seconds, or you can go to the Zoom meeting, which is right there. You can see it right back here at 28 minutes, and you will hear exactly you guys discuss this topic right there that I talk about in the findings. And so that's why, you know, most of this, as Clay was bringing up earlier, yeah, we're not going to do verbatim type of transcript minutes, because there's really nowadays, there's no need. In fact, I'm asking the city attorney and Rusty, our IT person, if we can just utilize our the Zoom, the feature now has that live feed that does the transcript. How well that does, if it does it well enough, we may utilize that as kind of our secondary minutes. You'll still get your minutes that you'll approve as part of the process. But what I would recommend, and I think I really concur with Commissioner Kerr when she brought up that you guys should review your findings. The majority of jurisdictions I've worked in, they do. That's what they do. And so they sign off on it because it's their recommendation to the city council. This shows you that from earlier, how much work has been done on the comp plan since it was introduced in 1979. You'll see that we really haven't done that much lately. So I think we're going to be going through a code audit as a joint process here in the coming year. I think we have an extra funding stream for that as well. We just went before the city council and at their retreat, and they've okayed it for January 5th to have more funds go towards the code audit. And so we're also going to have, I believe, matching funds from the state. And so I think we're going to have an opportunity to look at our code, which will not only look at ordinance changes, but will also highlight places in our comprehensive plan that may need some adjustment as well. So I see this as probably another 2 or 3 year project. And I think you can see from some of the work that we're currently doing on some of this language that it's much needed. And so we're not doing the visioning. The comprehensive plan update has been toned down to a code audit. And we're not going to do a strategic plan, but I project that we'll have some ordinance changes that will start probably at the end of this year and lead into 2022 with some pretty definitive new language and possibly recommendations for update to that design review board language as well as part of that. And then, like I said, it will also say, hey, you might want to look at these certain sections of your comprehensive plan. I just wanted to kind of show you guys our planning priorities list from last year and what we've talked about and what we're currently either in the red working on or have accomplished. And then that vision at least kind of postponed or put off for a while. But we're making progress. And I think that this year is going to be really decisive with the transportation parking study, the code audit. I think we're going to make some really big gains here in this next year. And so I really appreciate you letting me kind of talk about that. Now I'd like to hear from you guys if there's other concerns, or if you don't really want to see the findings or what you want to do instead. I'm happy to, and I'll stop sharing my screen.
Well, I would like to see the findings, definitely, before they're signed off on.
Everyone on board with that?
Yes.
I think so. Can you help with, yeah, I want to see them too, but I want to make sure we have time to do it. Jeff, can you talk a little bit to the timing from when someone submits an application to when the city has to have fully vetted it through its process? I know there's some time out there, and that might run up against our schedules. Can you talk to that?
So that is the one thing that Bill and I spoke about, is that's our biggest issue. But you know what I think, especially with Zoom nowadays, we could easily turn around the findings and you guys have a special call meeting a week later or 2 weeks later to approve the findings. So that, you know, it doesn't have to wait an entire month. And so, you know, that's the way I would suggest it. If we feel we have a 120-day issue, and then we may even just want to set a secondary time just for findings that follows 1 week or 2 weeks following, you know.
I think it's well worth taking that extra time, even though it is a stretch for some people, I understand. But I think it's well worth it, because I personally do not want to listen in on a council meeting ever again and see findings like were on that application attributed to the Planning Commission. It was very embarrassing. It was not what we based our conclusion on. It had nothing to do with short-term housing. There was a discussion about it, yes, but that wasn't why we denied that application. It had nothing to do with short-term housing or you know, workforce housing rather. Had nothing to do with it. The application had nothing to do with workforce housing. So I just can't, I mean, to have our name as a commission attached to a conclusion like that is just embarrassing. And I think that it's no one's fault. It just happens because there's so much going on, and there's so many, you know, the discussions are vivid and alive, and lots of things are brought in, which I think is great. I just think if we took, you know, 10 minutes to review the findings every couple of weeks, it would be worth it. Because the council had no idea what the hell we were talking about. They really didn't. What? workforce housing? What's that got to do with this application? It made us look like we were on Planet X or something.
So I appreciate that. Would love you to go back and listen to your discussion because I think you can learn from that.
Oh, I will listen to it, but
I think it's there, but I think, it does tie back to what we talked about initially. It's where we focus and what we focus on. So Lisa, I like your idea. I do think in some way we should look over these findings before they go to city council. Jeff, I had a question for you. You said something about the design review board never having used that form, which looked like it could be kind of useful to help manage some of these projects that need managing. You also said did I hear this right? They do not review, the design review board does not review residential application?
They don't do single family. Yeah.
Not single family. So how many design review meetings have there been?
Oh, they meet monthly.
Since you started.
They meet monthly.
They meet monthly. And how many projects have they actually reviewed while you've been here?
Well, like last month they had 5. It varies. I mean, they haven't had that many since I've been here. It's
I was just curious what they're doing. I mean, if they're not doing houses, I mean, there's not that many new buildings.
Well, that's it. And so that's a great point. And that's why they don't really use that checklist, is because there's not new buildings, but there's alterations. And so they have to do any exterior alteration. And so if somebody is changing, we just had one, for instance, of sea-level bakery, wanted to add on a patio area, Public Coast Brewery wanted to add a fire pit area. So we have those kind of things. That's what they review. And so this massive checklist and these massive application requirements are truly built for new structures. And so there's this huge gap between what they consider a minor modification and a major modification. And there's not any middle ground there.
Jeff, is it normal that a design review board would not look at single family houses?
Yes. I mean, well, are you saying across other areas or?
Other similar, let's take other similar coastal communities.
Well, yeah, I don't. I mean, I don't know in the state of Oregon, I don't think that there's that many that do design review, period. But yeah, in a lot of places I've worked in other areas, yeah, I mean, there's a fair split between those that just do commercial type structures and multifamily versus those that do everything. What you're seeing more and more of are communities going to form-based code. Sisters, Oregon is going to form-based code. You're seeing that more and more often. And that is a design review type of ordinance or control measure.
So I was chairman for the design review board before I came on the planning commission. And I don't know where this form came out that was on the screen here, the criteria that they reviewed, because I'd never seen that before. So I don't know where that materialized from.
Yeah, it's been there forever. At least I look back the ones even when Mark and before, they've had that there. So I'll look and see when that started. Yeah, I've never seen them use it. But then again, like I said, I've never been involved really with a big major new project either.
Right. Yeah.
Jeff, it seems to me one of the things I've seen in the city of Portland is they have certain districts that have design review overlays. So we've talked about different overlays, but one way to help manage some of the development and scale and how it blends into the neighborhood might be a design review overlay. We haven't talked about that, but maybe that's an option.
That's definitely the most places I've worked with design review is definitely part of the historic preservation areas of coastal areas or mountain town areas also have often a historic district, and that's exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, so I think the overlay is a great way to go. Yeah, and it's been mentioned here, at least at the design review level, that they would have that, that the single family might just be for the presidentials and the main arterial roads. So commercial, and then those single family and those overlay districts.
How are members of the design review board, how do they get their seat? Are they elected? Are they appointed?
Yeah, they're appointed as well.
Yeah, they're appointed just like we are through city council.
Okay.
Okay, good of the order? Okay, any last comments?
Thank you all.
Thank you, and have a good
Merry
holiday.
Christmas. Happy
Yeah,
holidays.
everybody.
Happy holidays.
Yes.
Okay.
Everybody. Bye-bye.
Okay, we're
Bye, guys.
adjourned.
Bye-bye.
Bye.